Okay, here we are.
Happy International Women's Day before anything. Hello and welcome to the Young World Federalist Women for World Federation livestream. I am Elizabeth Gamara. I'm a MEX doctoral fellow in Tokyo, and I'm also the co-host of Radio Natura, which is a multilingual podcast, and a member of WFM Japan Youth Forum, and I'm very excited to have you all here with us.
And I'm Esty McKaig. I'm the president of the Young World Federalists. The Young World Federalist stands for the protection of human dignity. And on this International Women's Day and every day, we recognize the essential contributions that the fight for women's empowerment has made towards the fight for human rights for all people. Today, we are here with 4 women, World Federalists, to discuss the this is your Elizabeth. You got to do this. This is your turn.
No worries. Yeah, but I will take it from there. Yes, we have 4 amazing women Federalists to discuss the intersections between women's empowerment and World Federation and how World Federalism can be more inclusive to women. So first, we have Emilia Ismael. Emilia studied international relations at the Universidad de Salvador, where she currently works as an assistant professor. In the field of civil society, she served as a volunteer and is currently the executive coordinator of Democracia Global, and international coordinator of the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly Simulation Model. In addition, she works as an advisor in the Honorable Chamber of Deputies of the Argentine Republic, and she was awarded a scholarship to participate in the World Youth Forum by the government of Egypt in 2017, and a year later by the World Federalist Movement to participate in the Ventone International Seminar. So thank you so much for joining us today, Emilia.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Next, we welcome Donna Park. Donna is currently the board chair of the World Federalist Association, also known as the Citizens for Global Solutions Education Fund, a U.S. nonprofit headquartered in Washington, D.C. She is a founding member of the Greater Cincinnati chapter of Citizens for Global Solutions and is a member of the Cincinnati Peace Committee. Donna also tutors high school math at Purcell Marion High School in Cincinnati. Donna has a BA and MA in mathematics with a concentration in statistics. She has been retired for 13 years after working over 30 years working in the global pharmaceutical industry, where she had responsibility for global clinical data management and global regulatory submissions. Thank you so much, Donna, for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And then we welcome Sandra Coyle. Sandra is the Consulting Executive Director of the World Federalist Movement, Institute for Global Policy, where she focuses on the strategic direction, funding, and structure of the organization. Before joining WFM IGP, Sandra served as the Chief Communications Officer at the African Economic Research Consortium, where she successfully redeveloped their 5-year strategic plan into a more innovative approach to meet the changing needs of a dynamic region. She's held senior positions in Africa, Europe, and Americas region, including in challenging and sensitive political and economic environments, leading global disparate teams across continents. Sandra also holds a master's degree in international relations from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, and a bachelor's degree in journalism and history from Rutgers University in the United States. Sandra is a U.S. citizen currently based in Nairobi, Kenya. And thank you so much for joining us, Sandra, as well, all the way from Kenya.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here today.
And lastly, we have a very special guest, Sovaida Maani. Sovaida, sorry, I even asked Donna how to pronounce it. Sovaida Maani. She's an author, speaker, international lawyer, life mastery coach, and founding director of the Center for Peace and Global Governance, a virtual think tank and online forum that pools and proposes principled solutions to pressing global challenges. Her latest book is The Alchemy of Peace, 6 Essential Shifts in Mindsets and Habits to Achieve World Peace. She also hosts the weekly live video podcast entitled Reimagining Our World, which you can find on the CPGG YouTube channel linked in the description of this video.
Great. So again, happy International Women's Day. Very excited and honored to have all of you with us today. It's also very inspiring to see 4 amazing women on the screen, and also Eston, who has had this wonderful initiative. So thanks for being here. Before we break into open conversation about how the movement for World Federation can be more inclusive to women, I'd like to ask each of you the question, why are you a World Federalist? and how does world federalism relate to women's empowerment? So we can start with Sandra, then Donna, then Sovaida, and then Emilia. So Sandra, please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much, Eston and Elizabeth. I'm probably the newest member of the World Federalist Movement, having joined the organization just a few weeks ago in January of this year. I have to admit I was not aware of it before July of 2020, which is why I'm with the organization, to help it become better known worldwide among women, really. And what drew me to the organization was it is a solution for many issues that women are mostly impacted by, I have to say, in individual countries. So climate issues, political issues, human rights issue, every issue we look at that are really involved in national discussion or discourse could really be handled globally. We have a lot of commonality between us that I've been lucky enough to discover, having lived and worked in most of the continents around the world. So it's been seeing the commonalities, see the burden of issues that women carry in society overall. Eston, I don't want to say men don't, they definitely do, but the majority, particularly in this region, you see it, they're dealing with the issues overall. So I think looking at the movement, one of the key goals I have is to ensure that we have young women leading the charge. We also have diversity, so we have representation from the Americas, from Africa, from Asia, as well as what's called the Global North, and we have good access points for them to join the movement. And that we're diverse and that there's women of color who are actually leading the movement as well. If we look nationally, we see a lot of young women who are activists now, who are coming up in Generation Z. If you look at some of the newer heads of states, they are women under 40. So I'm very excited for the future. I look forward to having more of these young women involved and joining together as a force outside of their national boundaries to move issues globally so that we can all benefit. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. That was wonderful. As a woman of color myself, I think that is very, like you touched on, really, really key points, and the importance of all of it being interconnected. So thank you so much. Now, Donna, can you please go ahead?
Well, I agree with almost everything Sandra said. I am passionate about women's rights, and I think World Federation is perhaps the best way to ensure that the rights of women and of all humanity are protected. So our current international structures do not provide for protection of human rights around the world. The UN has an amazing Universal Declaration of Human Rights that literally brings tears to my eyes when I hear it read out loud. I've heard it, and it's so moving. I guess that's one cool thing about being a woman. It's okay to have tears in your eyes, or hopefully it is. I think it is. I think that's a good thing. So it's strong, it's powerful, but there's no mechanism to enforce it. And that's where a World Federation would come into play. A World Federation would enable us to create and then enforce laws to protect human rights, to restore and sustain our global environment, to outlaw war and the weapons of mass destruction, and to ensure a collaborative approach in dealing with global health problems like our current pandemic. So under a World Federation, we could replace the law of force with the force of law. We could have a better world through world law rooted in justice. This would be helpful to women all over the world whose rights are currently not protected. So I also long for young women and women of color to step up and be leaders in the movement. I really feel like I'm kind of treading water here, waiting for someone else to step up and take leadership. I'm excited to say when I first joined the board of Citizens for Global Solutions, there have always been women on the board, but recently I was just at a meeting and there were more women than men at the meeting, and I pointed it out to everyone. It was really quite exciting. So it was our leadership committee meeting, actually. So with our new board members, and Eston was there. So anyway, so okay, I'm done.
Thank you so much. That was so inspiring. It's really wonderful to hear kind of the passion you have for that, and referencing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And Eleanor Roosevelt had a big impact and role in that process. So that is wonderful to hear. Thank you again. I'm very excited to continue the conversation. Sovaida.
Hi, yes. So I want to address both the questions you asked because I think they're fantastic questions. So what is my personal relationship with World Federation? Well, I am a woman of color. I usually don't describe myself that way because I'm not really into identities. I think of human beings as all of us being one and having a soul, and it doesn't matter. All the rest is part of the beauty of the human race. But anyway, I was born and raised in Kenya. So Sandra, Nairobi Hospital was where I was born. I was born right before Kenya became independent. So it was during the colonization of Kenya. And it was a very violent nation because they were going through the throes of the Mau Mau regime. So I grew up in a very unsafe and secure environment. 10 years later, we moved to Israel. I went to Arab school and lived in a Jewish neighborhood. And there was a lot of tension, again, as you can imagine there. And then I moved to England, and I was the only foreigner, woman of color at an all-women's boarding school, and faced a lot of internal persecution and difficulty there. So my journey throughout my childhood, on the one hand, in terms of noticing the absolute need for unity and peace in the world, brought me to Federation. And then on the flip side, I grew up with a faith that absolutely believes in, and I think is the only world faith that talks about the need for a world federation very overtly, with all the subsections. We need a world parliament, and this is what it should look like, and this is the authority it should have, and a world executive, and a world court, and so on and so forth. So I grew up actually believing that the story of humanity is the story of us evolving through various expanding circles of integration, starting with our loyalty going to the family, to the tribe, to the city-state, to the nation, and that the next inevitable step in our collective growth was going to be this reach for a world federation, where our primary loyalty would be to the human race as a whole. So my own experience confirmed that we need this. And I had this amazing belief that really humanity is ready to take the next step towards its unity. So when I think of World Federation, I think of world unity. I then pursued international law and worked at the State Department and in private practice. And then I struck out and set up the Center for Peace and Global Governance. And to Sandra's point, because I want to loop back, I, like Sandra, firmly believe that really the only solution to all our critical global challenges, including the existential ones like climate change and the pandemic and the threat of a nuclear holocaust, is creating a world federation. In fact, I wrote a book called Building a World Federation, The Key to Resolving Our Global Crises, back in 2015. It's a small book and it's very popular, I'm happy to say, amongst the young people. They just lap it up because it's short, it's easy to read, and it's basically proof of how we can solve a whole bunch of global problems by applying this solution of a world federation. How can we get women more involved? Essentially, I believe that peace in the world will not happen until women are in the highest levels of decision making and involved in all areas, as physicists, chemists, mathematicians, and as decision makers. And what's been fascinating to me about COVID is that it has demonstrated to us the power and the capacity of women. The countries that have best dealt with COVID have been countries run by women, and articles are being written about it. Why? Because they possess certain qualities that have been highlighted in these articles. Compassion, the ability to listen, the ability to draw on sources other than their own ego and their own opinion, their ability to think proactively and long-term as opposed to short-term and based on expedient solutions. So I have a lot of hope, and I think that how can we ensure women get more involved in federation, just to be really cognizant that their voice is critical to peace. So when we set up these panels like you've done, when we invite people to conferences, when we set up our boards, we actually mindfully think, do we have at least 50% of the people on whatever this platform is? Are they women and women of that hopefully diverse backgrounds in terms of race and ethnicity, and age, multi-generationalism, really important. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. That was so wonderful to hear. It sounds like your upbringings and your childhood experiences, as well as the interdisciplinary background that you bring forth, really is at the center of your message. And I loved when you said, yeah, it is unity. Unity at the end of it is something that we should highlight. And something at the end you mentioned, which resonates with me, is representation, right? In these spaces, how are women, especially young women or women across any age, represented? And that's great. So thank you. That was very insightful. And last but not least, we have Emilia.
Hi, well, thank you for the invitation again. I would like to start saying that I agree with all of you. It's very nice to hear you. And I would like to start saying too that I consider myself as a World Federalist because I strongly believe on multilateralism. And I mean, I believe on this idea that we can overcome global challenges in isolation. So I think that if we want to achieve prosperity, development, security, it depends on international collaboration and integration. I mean, it is more important than ever, solidarity and working together. And related to gender inequality, I think that we need to think as what it is. I mean, a global problem. No country in the whole world has achieved gender equality, and the COVID-19 pandemic threatens to erode all the gains that have been made in the last years. At the same time, I think I truly believe in a peaceful and participatory process that involves all the inhabitants of the planet. I work and I defend and I work in Democracia Global. I started as a volunteer some years ago, and I am the executive coordinator. And I work for the development of supranational political spaces for institutions, international and global institutions that live up to the challenges of today's world. I think that we need to have institutions that express the different points of view and defend the common interests of the 7 billion people who shape the humanity today. So that is why I think that the construction of a world federalism needs to be done from a gender perspective. I mean, they need to include parity, they need to guarantee the participation of women around the world. And I think that realizing gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls around the world, it's the first step also towards a world federalism and also to a more just and peaceful world. I think that it's very, I mean, the world is struggling. We have done a lot, but I think also that it is time to act. Solidarity matters, and we have the power of solidarity. We have seen this on the march, the international movements and national movements against violence, like Me Too or Ni Una Menos here in Argentina. So we must continue this solidarity because the achievement of full human potential and the achievement of a sustainable development is not possible if one half of humanity continues to be denied its full human rights and opportunities.
Thank you so much, Emilia. It's so wonderful to hear your perspective, and also it seems that everything that you're speaking, you're putting into action with the organization that you're part of, and really living that philosophy fully. And it's also great to have South America represented because it's a very important region that we shouldn't forget. So thank you so much. I'll turn the time over to Eston.
Yeah. So I'd like to transition to a more open discussion. But before I do that, I'd like to mention I'm kind of a history nerd. And so the first World Federalist organization is known as the Campaign for World Government, and it was founded in 1937, at least according to what I can find on Wikipedia. And this organization was founded by 2 suffragettes, which I think is super interesting. So in fact, there's a historical precedent for women leading this movement. Yet today, especially in my own organization, the Young World Federalists, there's a large and very disappointing gender imbalance. So that brings me to the question for this discussion is how can the World Federalist Movement be more inclusive to more women? And yeah, it's open. The floor is open.
I'll jump in with an idea. I think, so part of it has got to be raising the consciousness of the men, right? And one of the images that I often use in doing that, which seems to be very effective, is to liken humanity to a bird with two wings. And humanity cannot achieve the apex of its flight if both the wings are not equally strong. So once men recognize that their own potential will not be achieved and they won't be able to reach the heights that they otherwise might unless they allow and create the space and encourage affirmatively women to participate on an equal footing with them, that is the thing that's going to be the key. So in terms of your Young Federalist movement, I would start having conversations with, it sounds like, the mostly male population of the Young World Federalist Movement, and then get each of them to commit to going out and finding a woman to join the movement. I think that mindset shift, that ability to really recognize how critical that it's not just a nice thing we're doing for women. It's not just the, oh, okay, we'll let you into the club thing. It's the, oh my gosh, humanity is not going to achieve its potential. We're not going to achieve peace. Women are going to be the ones who put an end to war, because we simply won't tolerate the fact that our brothers and our fathers and our sons are going to be killed after all these years that we spend and devote to raising them and loving them. So I think that creating that mindset shift very mindfully, systematically, and methodically is important.
I'll jump in too. I also would like to encourage any women listening to lean in and step up. And I'll share a little bit of my own story, is that, I came to World Federation late in life. It was after I retired from my job and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the next phase of my life. And I read about World Federation. I'm desperately against war. I hate violence of all kinds, having come to age during the Vietnam War, admitting how old I am. And anyway, and so I went, my gosh, why have I never heard of this? And this is the best idea. We could eliminate the military for fighting each other and maybe turn it into a National Guard to deal with crises or other things. And then I sort of said to myself, well, what is an aging white woman in Cincinnati, Ohio, ever going to be able to do? And, I just got involved, and before you know it, I'm chair of the board. I found the men very welcoming and encouraging and helpful. And it just, I think in addition to having the men recognize that without the women, we're probably not going to make it. We also need the women to lean in and step up. And even if you're a little uncomfortable, which I have to say I still am. So, but that doesn't stop me from trying. And anyway, we need all of you to step up and join in and reach out to us somehow.
I guess I will jump in and just say, Eston and Elizabeth, I wish I could be more like Saveda and Donna, because I'm frankly losing patience, to be honest. I'm entering my mid-50s and child of the late 60s, so I benefited from the women's liberation movement in the US, but I don't feel the amount of progress. If you told me at 25 or 23 that when I was 53, I'd basically be experiencing the same situations in different parts of the world, I would have been very frustrated. So women have been very kind and nice, but I think what I love about this young generation is they're no longer being kind and nice, they're demanding, and they're taking ownership of issues. And I think, to Saveda's point about listening, I think women do that very well. I just wish more men would listen to the opinion of women, and that our experiences are just as valuable. It may be some kernels of truth in that. So within the movement, I've been very warmly welcomed. I think it's a definite sign that I believe I'm the first lady executive director with the organizations. That's a significant difference. But I would just like to ask those in the movement, listen to your fellow lady. I'm using lady because that's the proper term in Kenya, right, Savita? or women. Listen to them because and give them the space to voice their opinions and be heard overall, and create that space, actively create that space or seek it out. And if there's a woman in the group who's talking and who hasn't been talking, invite her to give her opinions, because I think women hold back now because they're afraid to do so for criticism. So I think, especially as the movement expands and becomes more accessible, we have to all actively work at that. And to be a bit more open-minded across the board. So I'm being a bit more critical than Soveda and Donna, but I think it's, I'm middle-aged now, so I can complain.
Well, I think that I will jump in to say that I agree. I totally agree with Donna that I think we need to speak up, like to challenge the status quo, to march along with not only girls and women, along with boys and men. We need to tackle this issue. And at the same time, just thinking about what I said before about the importance of supranational institutions, I think that maybe it's a little bit an utopia, but we need to start thinking about it. We need to create a world parliament. And the first step to do it would be the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, because there we can saw ourselves first and foremost like global citizens rather than national citizens. I think that the sentiment of these world parliamentarians would be of the dominant feeling of most of them. I mean, they will be elected to pursue the best interests of humanity as the whole. So, and this parliamentary assembly would also make it possible to give a voice to women and their struggles. And this assembly could take into account that there are different problems in each region that affect women. And sometimes there is like a Western dominant view to tackle issues that we need to also to take into account the specific problems that women in Latin America or in Asia or in Africa have. So I think that a good opportunity, I mean, the time is now, and we need to fight also to implement these institutions. And at the same time, for example, I want to say that in Democracia Global, for example, this year we are going to do the second MPA simulation model with the students from India. It's going to be online due to the COVID pandemic, but the importance of this model is that the topic will be gender equality. So the participants, the students, will represent the citizens of the world, debating solutions and making bylaws to tackle the global issues of gender inequality. I think that education is essential because we need to start telling students, I mean, young people, the importance and the inequalities that women around the world suffer every day.
Thank you so much for that answer, and I think all of your answers built on one another, and it started expanding a bit more of the dialogue. So that was wonderful. Like, just to add a bit of that, I think Eston, when he had this idea of having this wonderful platform, I was very happy because he's putting the work into action, right? And he's not female, but kind of provides that platform for us. And I think that's a great example of kind of the things that all the points that you all mentioned. But maybe we could go a bit deeper. I think with your respective organizations, are there any examples of the work being applied right now in terms of the suggestions that all of you have discussed? And maybe with Sandra, are there any examples that maybe talk a little bit about the points you've mentioned, like Emilia has referenced the work she's doing?
For us, I think it's looking forward into the future. As many know, we've been working quite heavily on a strategic plan since January, and there's a lot of new ideas in there for opening the doors, as I call it, in terms of expanding our efforts in certain geographic regions, but also with younger generations as well. We don't have the answers just yet. We're still working on it. To see what may work for us as an organization. We're very aware of the need. We're not there yet. So our hope is over the next 3 years that we make great strides in actively opening the movement to others. And I just wanted to point out, I think Jim Barton has a very interesting question over in the comments, but maybe that's after.
Yeah, we can talk about that if you'd like to. It's a good question.
Is it there on the screen? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I think it would be a fantastic idea. Go ahead, Donna.
I was just going to say that it's great to hear from Jim. Actually, Jim had been on a board member of Citizens for Global Solution Action Network when I was on that board too. And Jim encouraged me at the time. Our organization was going through a challenging time. And Jim encouraged me to step up as a woman and create a women's group. And we ended up, I would say, thanks to Jim, we had 2 men, including Jim, on our healing team, we called it. But it basically were the women stepping up at Jim's nudging, saying, come on, take leadership, you can fix this. And we went through a period of helping us talk through what our issues were, what the problems were, and we came out really strong. So I think it's a great idea that Jim has, and one that he's had before, and I have seen work. I will say that I was just trying to count. I think our board for Citizens for Global Solution now is about equal men and women. And so we continue to make that a priority of trying to keep our, and also get new young women on our board so that we working those issues among ourselves internally. Good to hear from you, Jim.
That's excellent. Thank you.
In terms of our work, so first of all, this is a women-led organization, and the work we're doing really involves to a large extent consciousness raising, shifting mindsets. One of the conclusions we've come to is that you can give people the best plan in the world. So you can say, look, moving towards a world federation will solve global challenges, and give them proof and demonstrate, and here's how, and here's the how-to manual, and yet they won't make a stride in that direction. And the question is why? People today have lost hope, especially in the aftermath of the pandemic. There's a sense of despondency, of anxiety, of helplessness, of victimhood. Oh, we're at the mercy of life, right? And you've got to, as we know from our individual lives, this is something I've learned from wearing my coaching hat. You can't get a person to shift and start taking the steps that actually benefit them until you get them to shift their emotional space and to recognize that there is hope and that there are choices to be made. So on the federalism consciousness raising level, that's part of what we've started layering in addition to sort of talking about World Federation and what it looks like. We're starting to deal with mindset at the grassroots level involved, and part of a critical component of that is recognizing the importance of having women participate at all levels of the conversation. So to answer Jim's specific question, would it be useful to have a women's caucus? It probably is a good start to get people accustomed to the notion that women have an equal voice. I mean, look, the ideal is to meld it so you don't have these women's caucus, men's caucus. We shouldn't, in an ideal world, need that, but this is not an ideal world, as Sandra has very eloquently pointed out. And we need to start by creating a women's caucus. Yes, I think it's probably a wonderful idea, and I would strongly recommend that you do it. We're also creating a lot of women's circles to deal with what Donna talked about, which is encouraging women to lean in, because women very often doubt their own capacity, no matter how capable they are. They think, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough experience, I'll wait till I learn some more, get a little bit more education. Meanwhile, the men just say, yes, I can do it, and they take off regardless of what the reality is of their capability.
Thank you so much, Sarita. I think that those were excellent points. It goes back to the saying, right? I think it's an American saying, but you can take a horse near a pond, but you cannot make it drink, right? So you can give as many resources as everything, but it's up to that person to apply it. So thank you. And Emilia, do you have any comments for what maybe I asked her, also the comment that was brought up by Jim?
Yes, when Jim asked that question, I remember that in 2018, in the World Federalist Movement Congress, we implemented transnational working groups. And one of them that is with great success is the Artificial Intelligence Transnational Working Group that is going great. And the idea of each transnational working group is to gather people around the world and to discuss ideas, to exchange ideas, opinions. I don't know, sometimes once a month, for example, in the case of this transnational working group. But one of them that it's not implemented yet, but I think that it's a good idea to implement, is gender equality. We are starting in Democracia Global leading artificial intelligence, but I think it could be a good idea to implement gender equality, and I think that it is more important than ever to implement it and to gather women around the world from different parts of the planet to discuss ideas, to discuss their own problems, and to discuss also the solutions that they can have, and exchange at the same time solutions that maybe work in one country and also can work in another.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I love about World Federalism. It's about kind of working across borders, right? And what all the points you touched are excellent. Feel very inspired. I do just genuinely feel very inspired to hear all your answers and how it fits to that.
Elizabeth, can I jump in with something? That I want to go back to something Emilia said earlier on with respect to a world parliament and a world parliamentary assembly. It's given that the world is now on this track we're starting to become aware of, and there's a growing movement for the creation of a world parliament, and there are different ideas of how to get there, but that doesn't really matter. Put that aside. Given that this is now gaining traction, it's all the more important that we ensure that this parliamentary assembly does not fall into the same old trap as all other elections we have. I mean, you said something, Emilia, that sounded like there was an assumption that, oh, this will be an amazing new way now for women to have a voice. Not necessarily, if the patterns of election are going to be the same. I mean, if in their national elections for their country, they're still electing men, if their representatives at the UN who are appointees, not elected, are men, if that's the role modeling, there is nothing to guarantee that a World Parliamentary Assembly will not fall into exactly the same pitfall. And it's something we have to avoid like the plague, because otherwise, you know, we're doomed. And so really creating this grassroots education and making the shift as quickly as possible is particularly critical.
Great point, Zobeda. Great point.
Yes, totally.
Those were
I'm looking at the comments in Octave One Love. Hi, Octave is from Africa and has put in quite a few. And one of them is, I am from Africa. Women are pillar of families, pillar of the economy, and yet they are underrepresented in leadership positions. Their voices are absent, are not heard enough, which in a way, Zobeda, is in line with what you just said. But perhaps we can discuss that, because yes, women need to lean in, but I'm not so confident that the space is there for them to lean into. And again, I know I'm being more controversial overall, but I would love to hear, maybe we can discuss this a bit more. And you see, the populations of the way I see it when I look at certain countries and poverty levels. Think of all that talent that isn't in the world because of this and how much it could improve the world overall. But I just wanted to, Ante is from Africa. I'm a visitor, so I wanted to make sure someone from Africa had some thoughts in. But there's a whole string here where Octave mentions Rwanda, which is 50%. I think the parliament is 50% as well, but maybe we can discuss it a bit more amongst ourselves as to how do we create that space. And I think Tad or someone else mentioned having more men on this platform, which would have been great to have that dialogue between us. We have Eston, and we don't want to put this on Eston to speak for all men, but perhaps we can discuss the issue of creating space.
Yeah, I would say that we definitely need to do it as Young World Federalists, as an organization and as a movement. It's something that we're racking our minds, and the best way to do it in the most efficient way. Events like this are the main thing right now, is trying to just connect our movement and our organization to women's empowerment the best we can, and encouraging women to become members of our organization. So that's what we have right now. And then ideally, we just got our first female member this morning, which we don't have that many, so it's still like 10% of all members. But we're very proud of that. I'm very proud. But yeah, nonetheless, we would like to see more, obviously. And then ideally, if we have 2 or 3, we can start and they can lead a working group within our organization. And tackle these issues much better than any of us young men World Federalists can do. Yeah.
It's not always that they're not necessarily nefarious motives to be attributed to this lack of representation. So I'm thinking of the Young World Federalist group. It's very normal. It's like who you hang out with. You start with a good idea, and then your buddies who are likely, if you're male, likely to be other young men, you talk to them, and maybe you're playing video games together, and you think, oh yeah, this is a great idea. And then it expands because those happen to be the people who are within your circle, right? And all of a sudden, here you've got a whole movement where it's largely, 90% young males. So all really it requires is really this idea of raising consciousness again and saying, okay, we need to move out of our zone of comfort. We may not have friends who are young women, but let's make a point of getting out there and inviting young women to participate. Look, it's the same in the world. I've spent a lifetime in my careers as a lawyer in England and in the United States, faced with the challenge of not being included in the circles of men. So when I worked at the law firm here, one of the things I realized is, we would have these big meetings with, the representatives of corporations on various side negotiating things. And I would have thought we would have hit the consultation at this point where we're about to make decision X, and then there would be a bathroom break. And everybody would disappear to the bathrooms. Well, the mostly men would go to the men's bathroom. And by the time they emerged, the decision had changed. And when we get back in the room, all of a sudden the decision was Y. And why was it Y instead of X? Because in the men's bathroom, they had continued the conversation. The buddies had hung out, the old boys, and the conversation had shifted, and it never occurred to them that the women were not present with them in the bathroom. I know it sounds bizarre, but this happens so many times, right? That I ended up putting a sign on the conference rooms, like no conversation on this topic allowed when you go to the bathroom, because all consultations have to be with everybody involved in the conference room. But they weren't even aware that they were doing that. It was just so natural to them. And so really speaking up, being outspoken and raising consciousness. So again, I would say to you, Eston, and to any of your other colleagues, go out and make it your goal. Like in the next month, each of us commits to move out of our zone of comfort and invite one young female friend of ours to join the World Federalist Movement.
I'd like to share some of my little pet peeves. So when I was in high school, I was in a co-ed school, but I was the only girl in my senior math class. I'm so used. And then as I just kept going on, I was used to being the only woman in meetings at work, and I feel like education that is same-sex education is bad for women. That that the sooner women get used to being with guys, the better, and the sooner, the better for them and better for the guys. So that the guys, so then you do have friends that you've known your whole life, and you know, it just, as a math major, I guess there often were more men, and even in college, but you know, but those guys are my friends. You know, so there's one thing is education. I feel like co-ed education is the healthiest way to go. The other little pet peeve I have is that now I'm totally, I know I'm US centric, but I'm sure this is true other places too. But is the fact that many people refer to God as he, and that absolutely drives me crazy. God is not a man. God is not a boy's name, is the name of the book I wrote for my grandchildren. And so I feel like if you think God is a male, you got a problem, and you need to start opening your minds. Those are two of my pet peeves. Thank you for letting me share them. I hope my children aren't listening. They're probably dying. Sorry.
I would like to add that, of course, there is a lot to do, and I think that we can do a lot, women and men as equals. But at the same time, I would like to say that I think that the COVID pandemic has shown us that there is a lot of violence through women in the houses, and this is called by the UN as the shadow pandemic. But at the same time, the COVID has demonstrated that they are the backbone of recovery in communities. So I think that the recovery, after the COVID, need to lead to a more equal world that is more resilient to future crises. I mean, we need to understand that national and international responses need to place women and girls at their center. And I think that the COVID and the world post-COVID could be a better world. And I want to have hope for that.
Thank you so much, Emilia. Thank you for all your answers. And I think all the answers, what they have in common, from my point of view, is kind of the idea of really redefining women empowerment. What is leadership? What does it mean to us? What does it mean for the larger public, and kind of the importance of, again, the themes we've been talking about: representation, the importance of knowledge and awareness. And this platform itself is a great awareness platform.
I thank you very much. I also thank you for everything that you're saying, and I think it's a great goal for us to do the outreach, however awkward it may be, especially for us young men. And then we've all been trapped inside, so our social skills around as a whole have diminished. So it's gonna be tough, but we will do it. It's very important. And ideally we can help shift the gender imbalance to something towards more equal than it is now. It's very important, and we need to do it. So thank you very much for all of your advice, and I appreciate it a lot. I guess we have one kind of a similar question. Are there any specific issues that World Federalist organizations should support in order to include or be inclusive to more women? So if there's anything that we should have a position on, that's also interesting, if you have an answer to that.
Position in what way, Eston? Like a political position?
Yeah, an opinion. An opinion. Is there any issue that we could come out and support? I mean, there's violence. There's the big. There was the 16 days of solidarity or something. It was a hashtag for violence against women, and so those are the sorts of issues that we obviously should be more involved in and engaging. And if there's anything like that, Similar with the with thinking about it like a World Federation and a UNPA, a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. Should we openly advocate that it needs to be equal? Should there be a quota, so to speak, for men and women in these bodies? And World Federation itself should be the body for women's equality, or the vehicle. I don't know. I would like to have.
And the one that Preston was referring to was the hashtag Yes to All Women for the violence. Go ahead.
I think there was a comment that was made about that. Should we have a world constitution that gives equal representation? I think, and apologies to the commenter if I didn't get that right. You know, it's funny because we discuss quotas, and I think when people hear quota, they freeze in certain places because, and I'd love to hear from Saveda, Emilia, and Donna on this, that if you look at Rwanda, you have it, but are you getting, I think in my generation, you got your seat by your ability and your experience. So I don't know if quota is the answer for that, but how do we embody maybe equal rights within a world constitution through world federalism? But I'm answering and posing a question at the same time, so let me leave that to everyone.
I'll jump in. So I take your point about the use of the word quota, and it's very important to use language that doesn't throw up barriers. Having said that, I think it would be a really good idea to articulate something in a world constitution or in a document or treaty that creates a world parliamentary assembly, which I hope will be direct election, and we actually need a world parliament, but that's my own view. I think UNPA is too attenuated. Advisory body to an advisory body doesn't actually make sense to me, because we need a body capable of creating binding legislation. So I'm going to talk in terms of a world parliament. We need to have something articulated saying that at least our aspiration is, in other words, highlighting the issue that we need to have at least 50% representation, not necessarily calling it a quota, but putting it out there as a goal. I say this because one of my friends who works actually in elections and monitoring elections around the world says that he has discovered that it's so interesting if you don't articulate the aspirational goals, including things like fairness and equity and kindness. People don't rise to them, but as soon as you put it on the map and you highlight it, people are far more likely to take it into account. It's just the way human beings are built. I guess there's so many things swirling around in our mind where something may not be top of mind. Whereas if you put this out there in some shape or form without imposing a quota necessarily and making it look like affirmative action when we know what people's negative responses are to that, then I think it's a good idea and actually quite necessary.
I like your word choice. I do think words are important, and I like your thought of just making it aspirational. But I don't know. Maybe a quota is what we need to get it started.
I hear you. I hear you. You know, does anyone know what they did in Costa Rica? I think Costa Rica is one of those amazing examples of nations where a very high percentage of their parliament members, as I recall, were women. I think it was at least 50%, and their president. And do we know how they got there? Emilia, I know you're from South America, but do you know about the Central American country?
No, I'm not sure in Costa Rica, and I think in Argentina it's not. It's very unequal, really. I think, as Donna said, I think that a quota is what we need. Sometimes I think that if we start thinking aspirational, sometimes it's far away from our objectives. So I think that maybe it's to establish quota and to act just to start to tackle this issue, because if not, it's going to be forever. That is what I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mhm.
And at the same time, I would like to say also that regarding to what Easton said before, I think that social media is a very powerful way for young people to express and to use hashtag and to go to march and support women around the world. I think that we need to take advantage of the technology that we have nowadays. And because it's the way to communicate women each other around the world. So I think it's very important to look for those hashtags and to follow them and also to participate in these movements like Me Too or Ni Una Menos in Latin America, for example.
That just made me think of, there was, I think this is a year or two ago, there was a video of women singing that came out of either Argentina, Chile, or Mexico.
Yes, exactly.
Worldwide. It was extraordinary.
Yes, yes.
That was powerful. That's when I realized, okay, yeah, I agree with you 100%, Emilia. The social media is very powerful.
Yes, it was a really powerful movement and very inspirational for women around Latin America. It was amazing, yes.
Do you remember the name of it? Just so everyone can go take a look at it. I think it's a great example of how to mobilize.
Yes, I will look for it.
Okay.
I have it.
Okay.
And as she's looking for it, I do think we need to wrap up. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. As Espen said, we definitely need to do one of these again to continue the dialogue because we have wonderful momentum going on. Just to add, because I know we've been giving some examples, I am part of WFM in Japan, and it's led by our president, which is Taketo Yamauchi. He's a student at Sophia University, and he is amazing. I have the honor of working with him, and he does create these wonderful spaces within Japan, knowing the culture in Japan very well. So I asked him how many women are in the group, and it is about 68% are women. And one of his goals is to continue moving that forward. So I want to acknowledge Taketo-san and the wonderful work he does in Japan that I'm part of. And as we're finding that the name of that video, which I think is important, as we're wrapping up, is there anything else you guys would like, women would like to add? I'm catching myself there. Before we finish, I turn the camera. Anything that you'd like to add as a wrap-up message?
So I have a suggestion. If any of your organizations is going to be having an annual conference coming up anytime soon, to make this one of the main themes of the conference. It's part of our own efforts at consciousness raising. And Donna, I'm thinking of the annual convention of our Citizens for Global Solutions organization as well. It would be wonderful to just make it a theme and get everybody engaged on it and think of ways that we can continue to broaden the circle to include more women.
Great idea, Soveda. I just want to say thank you. This is just thanks to Eston and Elizabeth for making this happen. I was pretty intimidated joining this august group of people, but it's just been fun, and I've been delighted to participate. So thank you. And thanks to all the listeners for being there.
And thank you, Eston and Elizabeth. It's been a real joy and an honor and a privilege to be on this panel with Emilia, Donna, and Soveda. I really appreciate this, and great to hear from the commenters. And I actually have to exit for a meeting, so thank you all so much. It's been really a joy. Hope we can do it again soon.
Yes.
Bye, Sandra.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Eston, again, and Elizabeth. Really a real delight to be here today with you all. And Emilia, it's been lovely to meet you.
Me too.
Donna, as ever, our powerful force here.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Easton and Elizabeth, for organizing this meeting on this special day. And thank you all, Sylvania and Donna, for being here, for expressing your opinions. And I only have words of Thanks. And thank you for everyone there with your questions. And there I wrote in the chat that it is Las Tesis. It is the group, the musical group that prepared that video. That is El Violador Eres Tú. If you want to copy, you can just look for it and you will find it on YouTube.
Cool.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'll put that on the screen right now before we go. So that's the video, I believe. Perfect. And that'll be the last thing. Thank you so much, everyone. It was great to have you here. Enjoy. Happy Women's Day. Happy International.
Yes.
Thank
Happy
you.
Women's Day.
Bye.
Thank you both so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.